Stick around because today we're going to talk about your story's stakes, what they are, and how you can raise them. What's up, guys? My name is Brandon McNulty. I'm a writer, I'm the author of Bad Parts, and welcome to my writing channel. Today we're going to talk about your story's stakes. And what I mean by these are anything that your characters stand to gain or lose as a result of conflict in your story. Gain and lose. A lot of writers make the mistake of only focusing on what your characters can gain, especially if they're going after some kind of personal goal, like they want to become like the mayor of their town, or they want to become a Hollywood actor, or they want to play in the NFL or something like that. A lot of writers typically focus on what a character wants and what they can gain, but they forget to mention what happens if they don't have that gain. What happens if they lose in the end? What do they stand to lose? If you have a character, for instance, who wants to go into Vegas and win a poker tournament and win $1 million, that's a great gain. Yeah, hey, that's awesome. Yeah, they're gonna have a ton of money. Great, good for them. But what do they lose if they don't win that poker tournament? If you forget to mention that, your story's not going to have meaning. On the other hand, if you have a character who goes into Vegas and they want to win a poker tournament so that they can win $1 million, and if they don't win that $1 million, then they won't be able to pay off the ransom money that their daughter's kidnappers are demanding. If we have that scenario, then it's meaningful. Then it has impact. Not only is there something that needs to be gained, but there's something that we don't want to lose. So keep that in mind. When you are thinking about the stakes in your story, it goes both ways. Yes, there's something to gain, but there should also be something to lose. Now let's talk about the two types of stakes. I'm going to break it down into two specific types. I'm going to say that there are personal stakes and there are community stakes. Now, when I'm talking about personal stakes, I'm talking about stakes that are important to one specific character, usually your main character. For instance, in the movie Die Hard, John McClane, the main character, is trying to rescue his wife from a group of terrorists who have taken over her office building. And in this scenario, the personal stakes are that John McClane's wife will likely get killed if he doesn't stop the terrorists. Those are the personal stakes. Now, in this story, there are also community stakes. And when I talk about community stakes, I'm talking about stakes that affect more than just the main character or your main characters. You might have community stakes that affect a family or a small town or a large city or the entire country or the entire galaxy, whatever it is. In Die Hard, the community stakes are that if John McClane doesn't stop the terrorists, more hostages will be killed. You can also say that the community stakes expand beyond this, and that if John McClane fails to stop the terrorists, people's overall faith in those who are charged to protect them will be shattered, and this could be something that could expand across the country. Now, one last thing I want to throw out in regards to these two different types of stakes is that sometimes you can really make a story interesting by having the personal stakes and the community stakes come into conflict with one another. And by this I mean that if you can have a scenario where your character has to choose between their personal stakes and their community stakes, this is where things can get really interesting. Oftentimes we see stories where a character has to sacrifice their personal stakes for the betterment of their community. On the other hand, you might have a story where a character sacrifices the community in order to protect their personal stakes. I think one great example of this is the video game The Last of Us, and this is a powerful story that has a lot of impact because one of the main characters makes a choice where they sacrifice the community in order to protect their personal stakes. Now I want to talk about raising the stakes in your story. And you'll often hear this from writing instructors. They'll say things like, you need to raise the stakes at the midpoint of your story. Or they'll say things like, the stakes should be at their highest toward the end of the story. What this basically means is that as your story is going along, the potential loss should become more and more devastating. At the beginning, it might not be a major loss, but toward the end, as we're seeing the characters grow, as they're going through a series of different events, toward the end of the story, that potential loss should be devastating. The characters should be doing everything they can to have that major gain so that they don't suffer that critical loss. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that when you are raising the stakes, typically you want to do these at the important moments of your story. I think one of the major moments that you should be raising the stakes is at the midpoint or 50% mark of your story. And that's because at the midpoint, usually there is a new piece of information that is conveyed to the audience. We learn something maybe about your main character or about the villain or about the situation, and as a result, the stakes should be raised. Uh-oh, we just learned something new. If the main character doesn't succeed here, then there's going to be a much more severe loss than what we thought early on in the story. So keep this in mind. Raise your stakes at the midpoint of your story. You should also be doing it in minor ways throughout the story, and toward the end, your stakes should be at their highest. Now, let me give you a quick few examples of how you can raise stakes in some basic storylines. For instance, if we have a story where at the beginning, the gain is victory and the loss is defeat, we have like a victory versus defeat thing going going on here. At the beginning, that's fine, but at the end, if we're raising the stakes, we want it to come off as life versus death. If we're writing a romance, we might have two characters who meet up at the very beginning. They're going on a date. They're looking for just maybe a romantic relationship, a quick fling, whatever it may be. And if they don't get it, if they don't get that particular gain, then their loss is that they go back to single life. No big deal. Now, on the other hand, over the course of the story, as these two characters get to know each other and they get to have meaningful conversations and we see how much they mean to one another, the gain toward the end of the story should be a meaningful, life-changing relationship versus the potential loss of self-destruction. And then one last example, let's say we have a character who at the beginning of the story is trying to achieve their dream of opening up a small business. And this is their potential gain. They really want to start a new business. And if they fail at it, then they have to go back to everyday life. They have to go back to their 9-to-5 office job, whatever it is. Okay, so not a big loss, but over the course of the story, maybe we learn some information about this character or maybe even their community, and we see how important it is that they do open up this business. And if they do open up this business, then their gain becomes finding their true self and redefining their community. But if they fail at this, then they end up wasting their talent or wasting the opportunity of a lifetime or leaving their community to crumble. But the important thing to remember is that when you're writing a story, you need to keep stakes in mind. You need to think about gains and losses. You need to think about personal stakes as well as community stakes, and you need to raise the stakes over the course of the story in order to keep things interesting and in order to send the idea that your story has meaning and impact. So I hope this helps. Question of the day, do you raise the stakes at the midpoint of your story? Let us know in the comments section below. Thank you guys for watching. If you want to support the channel, please pick up a copy of Bad Parts if you haven't already. Also, be sure to check out my other videos. Hit the like and subscribe buttons for me. Share this video with a friend. And as always, remember to keep on writing.